Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Irish Nerdcast, the podcast for all of your favourite nerdy topics, from space wizards to regular wizards. My name is Hannah.
And I'm JoJo, and today we're going to be talking about Dungeons and Dragons.
Woo!
Space wizards?
It's wizards in space.
Okay.
You don't have to think too hard about it.
So, yeah, this is episode 5, as Hannah said, and it was meant to be about fan service in media. But that episode is getting pushed back a little bit, and today we're going to be talking about Dungeons and Dragons and world building in Dungeons and Dragons, as well as a few points on One D&D, which will be releasing soon.
I think it makes sense for us to start with discussing our own entry points with D&D.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
So, from my experience, the first time I played Dungeons and Dragons was in college. You were the DM, and we were using 4th edition rules. It was very confusing initially, and even though we would later go on to play a different campaign with majority of the same people,
Majority, yes.
you could really tell that nobody came into it with the same expectations.
Yeah, and also I think that from going from 4th edition to 5th edition, I think even seeing how each of our players, each of our group has evolved or like grown, developed into someone different throughout our experience initially.
Yeah. Was that your first experience with Dungeons and Dragons? That 4E campaign that you DM'd?
Yeah, that was
Okay.
my absolute first introduction to D&D, and I just went straight in DMing.
Because I believe it was around this time that, because what it would have been 2016?
Oh, too long ago.
2015, 2016 sometime. I think Critical Role had just started getting big.
I
think.
That was shortly after. I think.
Yeah. So it D&D does, or rather didn't have the kind of the hold it has on nerddom and fandom in the public eye that it does now at that point.
Mm-hmm.
It was still very underground and was like considered nerdy even by nerd standards.
Yeah, it was very top tier nerd. If
you play D&D.
Yeah, that was the ultimate nerdum. If you played Dungeons and Dragons, you had this stigma of being like the guy who's in the basement with the glasses.
Yeah.
Going, actually.
It's Gary Gygax. The stereotype exists for a reason. Like, you were essentially comic book guy from The Simpsons.
Yeah. And now it's so much more in the public eye.
Yeah.
It's been in shows like Big Bang Theory,
Stranger Things.
We've seen a ton of actors who have come out saying that they play D&D, they play different nerdy games.
Yeah.
Vin Diesel, for one, actually plays it.
That one hot guy from Teen Wolf.
Oh yeah, and
Forget his name.
Joe. Malone, not Malone. What's his name?
I don't know. That's why I called him the hot guy from Teen Wolf.
Oh, I forget his name. Joe something. Anyways, not important. So I imagine anyone listening to us knows what Dungeons and Dragons is, or has an idea. But just in case, Dungeons and Dragons is a tabletop pen and paper role-playing game at its core. And usually you have a narrator who describes everything that's happening to the players and will determine the outcomes based on what people do. So, for example, if I was to DM for you right now, so you are a warrior, you are sitting at a tavern. All around you, there is laughing and cackling from all the people after their long day of adventuring.
Oh no, my social anxiety.
You are a bit of a loner, but you decided that today you might try and talk with someone. You see a cat man sitting across from you in a booth. You see an elf behind the bar cleaning glasses. And there is a group of adventurers at a table to your right. The group of adventurers seems to be fairly close knit, and there's a couple of seats available to sit at. What do you do?
I go up to the bar and I order another drink to combat that social anxiety I mentioned.
Okay. And barman's there, and he goes, "Welcome. What can I do for you?"
And scene.
Yeah. So that's basically the thing. Describes the scene, and you ask what they do in response. And then sometimes you might roll a dice to determine if it goes well or goes badly.
Now, we've both had experience as dungeon masters. You've had experience, as we said, with 4E, but also with 5E, 5th edition, which up until recently has been the most current edition of Dungeons and Dragons, because let's not forget this game has been knocking around since the late 70s.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
the fact that it's got such a history, and we're only coming up on technically a 6th edition.
It's not.
It's not really. It's meant to be a more definitive version, but we'll get to that. I have only ever DM'd using 5th edition rules. I'm curious, do you feel more comfortable as a player or as a dungeon master?
Honestly, I prefer being the dungeon master.
Same.
I have so many characters in my head, so much stories I want to tell,
Mm-hmm.
that when I'm a player, I'm already thinking about the next character I want to play as.
Gotcha.
So rather than, and I do want to play from time to time. Sometimes you need a break.
Yeah.
But I think when I'm the DM, I can really get the enjoyment from everyone else experiencing the world that I created.
Yeah, that's very fair. My thing, which is why I prefer to be a DM, is I often, and this is just how my brain works, I guess. It's not that I don't have a lot of characters in my head. I do, and being a dungeon master definitely helps with that, because you get to populate your world with all of these NPCs, non-player characters that your players are going to interact with. It's more so that when I am a player, I kind of, even before the game has started, for lack of a better term. So like, I have a character in one of your campaigns, one of your older campaigns, Karusk, who is a an orc. I have thought of so many different ways that his story could go already, and we only played maybe 3 sessions with him. I don't think we're ever going to revisit that campaign for various reasons, but like, I was thinking of so many different ways that the plot could go, and that doesn't give you the freedom as DM to actually lead my story somewhere. Do you know what I mean?
Well, the thing about that is the character story is a collaboration between the player and the DM.
Yeah.
So really, you should have a goal in mind, kind of a little bit of a backstory to your character. So you can say, this is what he has in mind, this is what he wants to achieve, and I can help you get there.
Yeah. I basically came to you when I was coming up with the character of Karusk. I basically gave you a full family tree.
Mm-hmm.
And just went, here are all of the people in his life.
Now, from what we discussed before and like what I told you I was planning afterwards, it seemed that I had a lot of ideas that were going to fall into what you had in mind.
Somewhat, yeah.
But it's a collaborative game. It's working together with your DM, with your players, other players, and making the story as it goes, evolving the story. I think from my perspective, even as a dungeon master, even when I have a whole world created, I I personally like to do what's called a sandbox type of game.
Yes, we've talked about this personally before.
Yeah. Whereas I create the world, I make it that in the immediate area there's enough stuff for people to do, and the world evolves as the characters evolve, and it kind of grows together. It also means that when the players go into the game, I'll give them a little bit of guidance. I'll be like, okay, you see a quest board. There's a quest board. You can do some quests. You hear a rumor of this. There's a couple of little hooks, and after that, it gets them started, and then they're free to explore how they wish. If they want to forgo all the quests and decide, you know what, let's just go into the forest and hunt some bears, then they can do that.
Yeah. Whereas my approach to DMing is a lot more, I think people might consider it railroading,
It's a little bit.
in that I am giving very, very obvious, like, this is next location, this is the goal, this is what you're currently doing. I've always described it as your approach to being a dungeon master is Skyrim, and mine is Dragon Quest.
It's a good comparison.
Yeah, like there's nothing wrong with either approach, I don't think.
No, neither.
But your players need to be aware of what they're getting into.
Yeah, and neither approach is right or wrong. For example, I have a system, my own system that I use in building my worlds. I ask certain questions, which is one of the topics we're going to be talking about here, is like what we do when we build worlds.
Mm.
And for me, I put in like the core of the social structure, the political structure, the economic structure, the religious structure, and the military structure.
Sperm.
I wasn't going to say it,
Sperm.
but for me, I have this core always built in. I ask these questions: who runs the place? How do they make money? And these questions then let me build sort of a base, a foundation, and have like the core things in each area that I have. I'll put a couple of key characters, key locations, and a few things in the area that are of intrigue. And as players go into those areas, I have a somewhat story ready for it,
Mm-hmm.
and it builds. And with yourself, you have this entire line,
I have a through line, yeah.
and you have each area built fully before getting to each.
That's the goal, yeah. I've tried applying your system to it. It doesn't always work neatly, but that's partially because that's not how my brain works when it comes to world building.
Yeah, that's understandable. Like for me, I do sort of have an end goal. I have these grand ideas in mind. I always think about stuff happening in the background. And it's very much a case of when I start planning my world, creating a world, like I'm thinking of the entire world in my mind, like as a whole.
Yeah.
And then I fill in all the other bits afterwards. Where some people might have the city that people start in, they might have that in mind, and then create the world around that.
We are also two people that like to make things very difficult for ourselves. In that, if you are somebody who is new to D&D, there are pre-existing worlds that you can work from the Realms Beyond or Forgotten Realms books. Both of us decided we're just going to start from scratch.
Yeah. Again, that can be an easier route for people to just go buy a book. But at least for me, I didn't have the attention span to read and learn an entire world. So I can make the right call when my players ask questions. And I felt it was easier to just go, yeah, it's such a god of such a place that these guys worship. And this is why XYZ happens. So I don't have to go looking up in a book. I think there was a person that was called that. Let me just yeah.
Yeah.
There's a tavern here, and this person. Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it slows it down.
That's fair. I mean, I have to do that anyways with my own characters sometimes. um, my Google Drive is a mess of documents that are years old at this stage.
Oh, I've picked up a lot of tips and a lot of habits from various tutorial videos, DM guides, and just my own experience as well. And I found that tools like OneNote and sites such as Legend Keeper, not sponsored or affiliated in any way, but just a program we use. Legend Keeper is a tool that allows you to create your world basically and have it all categorized tabs, so you can have the overall planet, and on that you might have nations, and then in another tab there'll be the cities, and in each city you might have tabs for all the different buildings and businesses and the people in them. You might have a tab for quests. So it's like ultimate drop down menu. If you love spreadsheets or organizing things like that, it's fantastic for that.
Yeah, there are plenty of online aggregate services that you can use. There's not just designed for role playing games like Dungeons and Dragons. They can also be used for world building of various other kinds. Like if you're writing a novel or
Yeah,
a webcomic or anything like that, it's just a good place to keep your notes.
that is true. It's fantastic for keeping track of your plot lines and lore that you've created and not basically contradicting yourself later on. So, yeah, if you're making a novel, if you're making a game, anything that has a story and a world to it, any sort of world building, it's usable. It's usable. What do you think is your main goal for creating a world? Like, what is it that you want your players to experience the most?
I mean, when it comes to the campaign that I DM'd for you and our friends, which unfortunately haven't had an opportunity to go back to since
We
the pandemic,
we want to.
it makes me happy.
We still want to. We need to find out what happened.
This is the thing, right? That's the goal for me. Is like one of the reasons I like doing the quote unquote Dragon Quest method is every session I like to leave you guys on a bit of a cliffhanger. So
Always leave them wanting more.
yeah, so like the last two sessions that we did, in my campaign.
Canathar? Is that his name? Canthar?
Yeah, that's his
Canathar.
name.
Yeah.
Canathar Cherboga, the man in red.
So many years later, and I still want to know what happens.
His deal.
I still want him to get his comeuppance. Like the intrigue is still there.
So in the last two sessions, you guys went to a logging town, a festival's on. You were also with a weird gnome guy who some of you hate and some of you like.
Came around on him
Yeah,
eventually.
Darcy's great. Anyway, the big reveal of all that is during the ceremony, a body is found.
Yes.
So a body is found of a dead local teenager, and the big kind of kicker was, I was laying seeds, sowing breadcrumbs, throughout the events, being like, oh, our friend Arlo Fry, who we mentioned last episode, follow them on Twitch.
Fun fact: the character's name came from this campaign.
Exactly, yes. Their character, Arlo, was asked by one of the locals, being like, oh, can you help me find my friend? And then Arlo seemingly does find them. Like, they bump into one another, and she says, oh, you should go meet up with your friend. She needs your help, or whatever. And gets the affirmative, like, yeah, okay, will do. And then the body is found, and it's this particular person she was asked to find. And one of our party members, played by my brother, does a medicine check, and they find that the body's been dead for maybe an hour, maybe more.
I think you said it was like a couple of hours at that point.
Yeah, an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then Arlo turns to me and asks, "When did I run into him?" "About 20 minutes ago."
So, long story short, we find out our main antagonist can shapeshift.
You don't know that it was him.
We have an idea, but we theorized it was him anyways.
Yeah, and again, there are many other plot hooks that I had laid here that you came to find that, the dead body wasn't casting a shadow, and then you learned about the College of Bards that can specifically take shadows and use them to disguise themselves as a person. And then the sun started setting much faster than it should be. And then all of a sudden you hear howling and you're beset on by shadow hounds.
Which is fun when
fight for your life.
Which is fun when you're playing as a cat person. And then a bunch of dogs start attacking you.
But yeah, it's those moments where I have all of you guys kind of on your toes. Where you're like, but we thought it was this. No. It was actually deception by me.
So many red herrings.
It's fun.
But that was a great tool for you to keep us on that track. Because you set up this antagonist that we ended up chasing.
Oh, yeah.
We were always following him to the next location.
Yeah, even in the very, very first session that we did, you guys you were all in your starter town, and you learned that there were dire wolf attacks. And you're like, oh, that's super unusual. And then you have a fight with, not a dire wolf, but I forget the name of the monster. It's essentially a 2-headed wolf that is, decaying. Can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. And so you go, okay, the 5 of us, we're gonna, just on precaution, we're gonna set out and we're gonna camp here and monitor for any further attacks. You do come across a direwolf pup, which you save, but at the point where you guys separate, where 3 of you go to tend to this wounded animal, and the other 2 of you stay where you are, that's when I say that the warning bells start ringing and then the session ends.
Yeah. Joy.
This is the type of thing you gotta do as a DM. Matt Mercer taught me well. Actually, not even Matt Mercer at that stage. I hadn't started watching Critical Role yet. It would have been Griffin McElroy of the Adventure Zone. That was my main source of inspiration as a dungeon master at the time.
And I think that having a plot hook at the end benefits not only as a DM for episodic play, but just in storytelling in general or in video games, etc. Just those little things that...
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be huge. Those are 2 very big examples of, oh God, what are we going to do? A previous plot hook that I use is, as we mentioned, that gnome character that I introduced. You guys had just finished saving an elf commune from giant awakened trees, and on your way out of this enchanted forest, you come across you come across a gnome just asleep, and he's got a giant snake with him, and it's he's following you now. End of session. Do with that information what you will. It doesn't always have to be a big dun 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 moment. It can just be a little, this is going to happen next time. Think about that.
Yep. And that's a little insight into the story that Hannah's weaving and how that relates to a slightly more plot-driven world.
Yes.
And I suppose for one of the worlds that I created, which was Rivera.
Inspired by the world of Magic the Gathering.
Very heavily inspired by Magic the Gathering.
That's fine.
I basically created Ravnica as a world.
It was cool. I really liked that. That's the campaign that Karusk was in.
Yeah. And I did a typical classic start where it's normally the party are already formed. The players know each other. They're thrust into a situation where they have to work together. in this world, everything worked around guilds.
Also very fairy tale inspired.
Yeah, there was inspiration from.
Fairy tale the anime, not Grimm Brothers.
There was a little bit of Grimm Brothers too,
Mm.
but it is a case of Rivera was very much a world created around all the other medias that I was into. It was inspired by animes I was watching at the time. It was inspired by Magic the Gathering. And all these things will bleed into your world. If you see something that's cool, or, oh, that's really interesting, you can use it. Not everything in the world has to be original.
And sometimes you stumble across references that you don't even know that you're making.
Yeah. You think you're being original, and then all of a sudden, oh, that's just like such a thing. And such a
That
thing.
reminds me of XYZ property. And you're just like, oh,
Okay.
I guess.
Nothing is original. Everything is a remix.
Yep.
And not to go on too much of a tangent, go back to the main point. In my world, with their guilds, the players are dropped in. There's quest boards. I tell them, this is the situation. This is what you have to do. Give them a little bit of an introduction to the world, saying this is what magic is like here. This is the expectations, how dangerous is the world, how fantasy or realistic is going to be. And with me, this is everything that you can see. This is the area around you. Here's a quest board. Here's a map. What do you want to do?
Yep.
And some people do struggle with that. Some people like to have very obvious hooks or like to be railroaded a little bit. Some people like guidance.
It very much depends, as I mentioned earlier, on what your party's expectations are. Because one thing that some people would likely try to avoid is spend 5-10 minutes of your limited session time trying to figure out what quest to take.
Yeah, which there's very fun moments when I get to sit back as the narrator, the DM, and just watch the players play it themselves, like just
trying to figure it out, like talking in character, being like, "But no, we should do this for these reasons."
And those are some of the best moments because that means I'm doing my job correctly as a DM.
Yeah.
Because they're invested in the world. They believe they are in this world discussing these things about what they should do, interacting with the characters. And it is amazing how it unfolds. It's going to be a unique story that no one's ever heard.
It's important to note, though, that we both had some emotional maturity at that stage, and we were very well acquainted with all the people that we were playing with. We'd been friends for years. And we had both had extensive discussions with each of our players individually to kind of figure out what their expectations were, exactly what they wanted to get out of the game, etc., etc. It's important that if you're a first-time DM, not to power trip, basically. You can't throw a tantrum if your players don't do what you expect them to do. Is it going to be annoying at times? Yeah, it can be. Matt Mercer has actively he said that, like, and he's a professional DM, for lack of a better term. But at a certain point, you're going to have to realize that D&D is just improv with dice. So you got to roll with the punches. You got to take your players' feelings and their desires into consideration. Now, if your players are being assholes about it, then that's a different conversation. But you can't just rocks fall, everyone dies just because they're not adhering to the game as you expected them to.
Yeah, and we are getting a little bit more into the running of a game than actual world building and stuff. But
we can, you right now are developing your own, another campaign based off of Norse mythology.
Yeah, I'm currently writing a campaign for it. It's loosely based on Norse mythology. It does have inspiration from some Greek mythology, a little bit of Irish mythology, actually, and just some general fantasy tropes. But it is also very heavily inspired by an anime called Attack on Titan, which honestly I haven't watched because I'm not a big fan of the Titans themselves. They weird me out.
I think that's fair.
I know a lot of people love Attack on Titan, and the thing about it is there's also a lot of Germanic references in that. So there's definitely an overlap. But Nordenfell, there's a continent with multiple nations all moved to.
Mm-hmm.
It's a brand new, very unexplored land where there's new resources and a safe haven from the current threat of frost giants, which has basically driven most nations to leave their homelands and come to this safe haven.
Yeah.
So right now it's a bit of a bastion, and there's going to be a lot of political intrigue because there's so many different nations together working with each other or against each other to try and create a new life for themselves. So normally I would try and create an entire planet basically of different lands and different nations, and they sail to each other, or what the trade routes are, all this sort of stuff. But to make this a little bit easier on myself this time around, I've actually focused in on this one continent that has, I believe, 9 nations.
Yeah, I remember when you started pitching the campaign setting to me, you asked me specifically when coming up with a character to be like, this person is leaving their home. So you have to consider where they're coming from and where they're going.
Yeah. And one of the things behind that was I love games in general that allows you to start from scratch and build up.
RimWorld?
Kind of. Like RimWorld, SimCity, not so much anymore, but City Skylines, those type of games, you start from nothing and you build up. I love that in video games, and I thought it's one of the things I wanted to do as a player in D&D was like, it was always interesting when you got this base of operations.
Yeah.
And I thought it was intriguing to build up from there and how you survive, basically.
Yeah. It's something that I think is best introduced early on.
Mm-hmm.
Because, as I said, because my campaign is more Dragon Quest inspired, which means you're kind of on the road a lot of the time, that is something I wish I'd allowed you guys to do earlier. But then when you have a big continent sweeping campaign or multi-continent sweeping campaign, depending on what you're doing, you then have to start getting creative and like trying to either limit the amount of time that it can spend in their base, because if they can just hole up there the whole time, you're never going to run out of resources or protections. Or you need to figure out, oh, they need to get back in a hurry, other than a hand wave of, yeah, you travel for like 4 or 5 weeks and you're back. You know, what can you do?
Yeah. Some of, like, going back to original Dungeons and Dragons, when it was first created, was very much the journey from one point to the other that was most the game.
Yes.
Like, the journey was the game. What was what are you doing along the way?
Yeah.
The encounters you have, etc. And it, again, depends on the players. Like, you can have the world set up for a specific thing, but if it's what your players want to do, that you should be kind of building the world around as well. So even though initially I have it that the players will start as a group on a boat, the game was actually going to start on that boat on the way to the new land. So everyone's already together, and straight away they're thrust into a situation where they have to work together because it's stormy seas. Straight away they're going to be rolling a few things to see, spoiler, if they capsize or not. So if they capsize, one outcome will happen. If they don't, then they continue on with their journey. They might get to talk a little bit, build some skills initially. And I'll fast travel a little bit, saying, okay, so a couple of nights you spend doing this. Some interesting things happen, some stuff didn't. And they will land in their new location. So They're after traveling from an old land, their home, being driven away from their home by frost giants, and now they're in this new land with little to no resources. They don't have anything. There's very little structure already built there, and they need to survive. So they need to have a source of food, to get some shelter, stuff like that, and they can build up from there. But that's if the players want to play that way. If they don't, the settlement, there's still other people with them. The settlement will build up. And if they want to say, well, we're going to scout, we're going to go exploring, then they can explore. If they want to go to something that's already established, there's nations and areas that have been built before they got there.
Yeah. It's also a great way to force your players into meeting one another.
Yeah.
Because arguably, when you're starting a campaign, that's the hardest thing to do. Because your players, unless they specifically say, oh, two of us are a duo, we have a pre-established relationship or whatever, 9 times out of 10, every D&D party starts off as complete strangers. They meet in a tavern, they all take the same job, but whatever. There's no guarantee that they're going to like one another. That's weirdly one of the things that the campaign that I DM'd with you and the rest of our friends kind of struggled with originally.
Yeah, where our characters were very different, all had very different backgrounds, and honestly didn't seem to have much reason to actually be together and like travel together.
Because you, as you said earlier, you were playing a catman, Tabaxi, which is a race that was newly introduced at the time. It had only just been released in Volo's guide. That was one of the reasons we started looking into getting back into D&D, because a bunch of new species, had been introduced. And so it was kind of a case of, okay, why are you going here? Our friend Arlo and our friend Nix, both named their character, using the character names there. They specifically said, okay, we're a tiefling and a gnome, but we want to come in as a duo. And so I thought, all right, good way to get the three of you into one place is you are both taking up this job about these magical caves. It makes sense for your character because you are an investigator. It makes sense for the other two because one's a wizard and the other is a friend who happens to be a bard. They're two women traveling together. That's all fine. And then our remaining players were a lizard folk and a turtle. Absolutely no reason to be there whatsoever.
A lot of beast folk.
That's why you guys went with the name the menagerie.
Which I've actually referenced in my world that I'm currently building.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
In a city that is basically filled with beast folk.
Yeah.
I called it menagerie.
It literally looks like a gnome and all of her bestial friends.
Would a tiefling count as a bestial friend?
It's non-human, I guess. Traditional humanoid. Anyway, and it was literally just like, I remember turning to our friend who was playing the turtle being like, you're in a pond, you're in a lake hunting for fish, and he's like, yes, fish, good, I like fish. You come up out of the water and you see a lizard folk and they just go, kinship, because we're both reptiles. And then you guys happen upon being like, oh, we're gonna go check out a thing, we'll join you.
Awkwardly.
We're also here and we're gonna do the thing. And I eventually got it to a point where like you guys are in the magical cave and there is a reason for you all to hang out now. But that first bit is always so hard.
Yeah, it's
why so many actual play podcasts, not for, not Critical Role because Matt Mercer is a fantastic storyteller, but literally the very first episode of The Adventure Zone starts with them going like, oh yeah, you were all found on Craigslist. Fantasy Craigslist. It's this dwarf named Craig. He's got a list of adventurers looking for work, and you guys were picked out of a hat.
Yeah. There is a meme for it's being like you all meet in a
Craigslist.
But like you all meet in a tavern. It's always like
it's always a tavern.
You start in the tavern, And it's just because that's a place people go to meet, and you meet strangers, and you get talking, and like, oh, we should party. But I think, and this is relevant to world building still,
It is.
because I think that I build the reason for traveling together into the world itself.
Yeah, like in your
Rivera.
in Rivera, it was we were four. We were four new inductees to one of the guilds.
And the new members get put together.
Yeah.
They had to be together.
It just makes sense.
They didn't particularly like each other initially, but
it worked.
Yeah, it worked out. They had a reason to be together, and they continued on doing their campaign. In my current world, it's a case of you're all fleeing on one of the only ships over to the new land from that particular area.
You're sequestered together. Like you have no choice but to engage with these people.
You might not all be from the same area, but you are all on the same journey. And when you get to the location, you all have the same goal. Or at least similar.
And another way you can do it, it's a little more... again, it kind of leads into that fancy Craigslist aspect, but if I do start a new campaign, it's likely the way that I'm going to do it is... If you're a fan of D&D, you're likely familiar with Spelljammers and the Planes Beyond. That's the type of kind of almost sci-fi fantasy that I would be looking to do next, just because that's what I'm into at the moment. And I would just be putting out like job postings for a ship's crew.
So you end up on the gummy ship for Kingdom Hearts, and just you're the crew for that ship going around different planes?
Yes, exactly.
And, oh no, you run out of fuel. You're on this plane now.
Well, it's not even that. It's just, again, it's a good way to give, one, to set your players' expectations of you are going to have this ship that you're going to be on. But two, it means they have a opportunity to pick a role on said ship. And it means that they will also, even if they're all brand new crew members, means they're going to have some type of working relationship. And again, you are forcing them all into this one group in a way that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think it's also a great way, if you have a character as a DM in that situation that's like giving people responsibilities and roles, it makes sure that not a single player is just sitting back watching and not doing anything.
Yeah.
If, for example, for Nordenfell, they're on the way, there's a man there going like, okay, we need someone on the oars, we need someone doing this, we need someone to tie down the supplies, we need someone keeping an eye on
navigator, something.
Yeah, navigator. So give everyone a role, give something to do, no one gets left out. There's no... It helps when you have those hero characters that think they're the main character.
Oh boy.
So, which can happen. You have the one player who basically makes the story revolve around
I'm
him.
the protagonist.
So, yeah. And
that's actually something I'd like to talk about a little bit, just in terms of DMing and world building, because you've kind of talked about how your approach to world building is you build it out before a player even hits it, right?
Yeah, like I've been thinking about this world for over a year now.
Yeah, like it's fully fleshed out. Like there is, no stone left unturned, as it were, before even a player goes, all right, I want to go here, here, and here. And you're like, cool, I know exactly what's happening. My approach to world building was not that.
I do want to make a point that I don't have it like, I do have like the basic layout, like
right, yes,
but yeah, it's not completely fleshed out. I have just the basics that I can give them something to go off, and then I'll build around it.
Yeah. Whereas my world building was very much informed by my players. So, for example, we've already kind of alluded to, or we've already stated actually, that there's a lot of beast folk in the party. And so I asked my brother, who was playing the lizard folk, being like, you know, what do you think your homeland was like? And he went, okay, what I think it is every lizard folk has a particular job. They live on these islands where they are, you know, there's an egg giving ceremony, and then their, you know, their progenitor will raise the new hatchling to take over the job once they get too old.
That's actually really interesting. This is all new news to me.
Yeah. So that's why that character's name is Motsu. Motsu is Draconic for doctor, using the translator that I found. So there's
tools for everything.
There's tools for everything. So his character's adoptive father was also called Motsu. And, you know, it laid way there. And he gave me other things of like, here's what I want to happen, right?
Wait, I'm hoping to go back to this campaign. Don't give me too much.
I'm not giving you too much. But I took that and I went, okay, what else can I do? This is like my first building block for this lizard folk society. And then I came up with, okay, there's going to be a main island where like the leader of these lizard folk live. And then there's going to be 5 offshoot islands, and it's going to be like a dragon claw. Okay, maybe the dragons were there before, and maybe the lizard folk were in servitude to the dragonborns before the dragonborns left and integrated into larger society. And then, you know, that's how those wheels get turning. Similarly, I mentioned this in another episode. I believe one of our Magic the Gathering episodes, we talked about briefly the race of the Yuan-Ti. And I said,
yes,
my interpretation of the Yuan-Ti is that there are the snake people and there are the people snakes. If you're going rules as written in the books where this species is mentioned, the Yuan-Ti can essentially be divided into 2 camps. Less so now, but this is how it used to be originally, where there were these snake humanoids who were born as such, kind of like, as we were saying with Braska, they are like Naga-esque.
Pure blood.
Yeah. And then there were these humans who, through ritualistic rites and dark magic, gained snake-like features.
Which, as of the current iteration of Dungeons & Dragons, seems to be
the main one.
Yeah, that seems to be the kind of main thing.
So people with snake-like eyes, tongues. In some instances, the art just has them like a minotaur, but with a snake head. And that's what that's one of the illustrations.
That's actually kind of cool. I didn't see that.
So this is one of the things I took into my world building, that, okay, these are 2 different camps, but they are both referred to as Yuan-Ti. What does that mean for the public perception of this group? And so there was a point where Yuan-Ti get mentioned in one of our sessions, and Nyx, the wizard, who is an anthropologist by trade, asks the other 2 reptiles in the party, what do you think of the Yuan-Ti? And in complete unison, they give totally different answers, in which the lizard folk says, oh, they're great, one of my best friends is the Yuan-Ti. And the turtle says, they're the most vile, despicable creatures known to turtle kind. And then they both just look at each other being like, what the hell are you talking about? So that's another great example of how your players and their assumptions of how the world is going to go based off of their character's background is going to influence the world building going forward. Because if you guys ever met a Yuan-Ti, that could go very differently depending on which type it was.
It'd be interesting as well, given, say it was friendly.
Yeah.
For the turtle. Turtle's there ready to fight.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's like, it's one of the good ones.
Yeah, it's a snake person and not a person snake.
Kind of ran into a similar thing in Nordenfell, which I was working...
Which is the name of your new setting.
Yeah, my new setting is Nordenfell.
Yeah, the name of my setting is Ashelon.
Ashelon, yeah. And I was deciding, there is a lot of species in Dungeons and Dragons. Formerly race. They're now
they
referred
changed
to.
It.
Yeah, it was race. It's now It was formerly a race. It has now changed to species. Some people have a problem with that. Some people don't.
It's fine.
It's the way it is now, so we're going to try our best to say it. And given that there is a lot of species in Dungeons and Dragons, I didn't want to have every single one in my world. I didn't want to have, or at least as a playable character. And it was picking and choosing which ones was going to go in.
Yeah.
And I was trying to decide between like elves and Triton, for example.
Sea elves, you mean?
Sorry, sea elves and Triton.
Yeah.
And basically in my world, because in Nordenfell, the lore that I have created is that all of the species resemble a god.
Mm-hmm.
So the mortal life, or I should say like human beings or mortal beings, are all created in the image of a god. There was the original ones that were created, and then the other gods wanted ones created in their image. So that's where they were spawned onto the realm. So like in Norse mythology, I have the 9 realms, and the human realm or the mortal realm is where, well, I guess it's a little bit like an art project for the gods. Like it's like a little playground for them.
Which is more so Greek inspired, for sure.
Yes, there's a lot of Greek there. Again, like I was saying before, there's inspiration from multiple mythologies.
Mm-hmm.
And like in Greek, they come down from time to time to the mortal realm, but not in their true form, because, you know, your character and yourself doesn't really know this information. But
yeah,
if a god goes on to the mortal realm, they can't go as their true selves. They can't go all powerful as a god. They only have that godlike power in their realm, in the high realm.
So it's not quite a Fizzbound situation.
No.
We'll get to Fizzbound later, probably.
But it's kind of like an avatar, but like they basically become a lesser being of themselves. They don't have their power. So they would never truly go down, but they might make a kind of a puppet of themselves, or like
an aspect.
Yeah, there's an aspect of themselves that they put down into the earth.
That's what the official word is. If you look at the D&D monster manual, you're never fighting an actual god. You are fighting an aspect of their power.
Yeah, a fragment of them.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter how much you want to punch a god in the face, they will kill you.
I'm sure you could work with a DM to eventually get there, but that's beyond endgame. Yeah, and I completely remembered, as you were discussing earlier, the sea elves and Tritons.
Because this literally happened today. We were looking through the list of species you wanted included, and I asked you, are you going to include Tritons? And you said you didn't know because you had already included the sea elves.
And in my lore, being that they are in their image, I was like, well, there's only going to be one sea creature species playable, because that's the one that's in the image of the sea god or the water god.
Yeah. And then I explained to you the rationale. I'm using an echelon, which is Tritons are born in the water, they originate from there, whereas sea elves were elves that retreated into the water and evolved to survive. Which
I'm using as lore in my world too.
Yeah.
Now. So because of that, it's a part of the world building of like what races you have in, and now that itself has created a little bit of point of intrigue or point of conflict, because that means there's the Triton who are originally from there and are in the image of the god, but now there's another species there that was not meant to be there originally. And that itself leads to a conflict, and that leads to more world building and story building, because they're not together. They seem to be opposed to each other, so that means there has to be some sort of underwater kingdom. There's 2 kingdoms.
Warring factions.
So there's
2 houses, both alike in dignity. Fair Atlantica is where we set our scene.
So these little things of what characters are in your story, what players want to play as well. I have to kind of think about if someone wants to play as such a thing. Well, my lore has it that just say, for example, someone wants to play a species called Warforged.
Which is a construct.
Yeah. Warforged is a construct robot-like creature.
Yeah. Fancy robot.
It's basically using really high technologically advanced magic to create a being who is sentient. In the lore of Nordenfell, magic is diminished. Magic is extremely rare, at least in the arcane sense. There's still a good bit of divine magic and draconic magic, all that sort of stuff. But overall, arcane magic is diminished because of lore reasons with a god who got tricked and, as mentioned before, was sent to a plane where their power isn't as strong. And without the god of magic, magic isn't doing too well. So there was once a civilization who was built up on magic. They were very advanced. They basically ran society with all these magical gizmos and relied on magic heavily. So when there was no magic, that civilization collapsed.
Mm-hmm.
But still, there is some technology left over from that time. They're kind of relics, they're runes, different stuff like that. You might see these giant constructs laying dormant. You can see portals that used to be devices from traveling from area to area. And one of the things is constructs, such as the Warforge. Now, the technology's been lost. They are mostly all dormant, but it is possible to maybe, if a player really wanted to play as one, I could make a reason that this particular one is alive.
Yeah.
But that adds, as you're saying, the players are adding to your world building.
Yeah.
So normally the idea is that no, they're not going to be able to play as a Warforge.
But you also don't want to be like, if a player comes to you and goes, I want to be a Warforge, you can't go, no.
Yeah.
Not allowed.
It's always best to try and do a yes and, or have a accepting outlook for what your players want to do.
Yeah. You are there to facilitate your players.
Yeah, they want to have fun. So let them have fun. Keep it in certain expectations, like don't go absolutely crazy maybe, but allow them to see what happens. And that can create memorable moments. And again, that can also shape your world because something that wasn't possible or something that you didn't account for has now happened or has changed.
Yeah.
So as we said before, there's no one proper way of building a world. It is always going to evolve. And this episode could be multiple hours long.
Yeah. Just
talking about world building.
We probably will have another episode in future that goes into it in more detail.
Yeah. Probably more structured. This, like our previous episode, is a little bit more freeform. We came into this just to have a discussion. And if there is stuff in world building that you just want to talk about, ask us questions on it. You can find us on all our social medias.
Yes.
We're fairly active on our social media. And you can also, if you're a member of our Patreon, you can join the Discord. And the Discord has a section for Dungeons and Dragons in particular, which is another area that we can discuss in detail some world building things. But speaking of change from before, one of the things that we have to discuss if people are going to be playing Dungeons and Dragons going forward is the changes in One D&D.
Oh boy.
Now, we're still reading through a lot of it.
Yeah, a lot of new information has come out very, very recently.
Yeah, the player's handbook for One D&D has just released for people who have pre-ordered it digitally. So I've only read a little bit of it. I've gone through the races mostly. Species mostly. I've noticed what's there, what's missing, what's not missing.
Yeah, I've notes.
There's a couple of notes. There's a lot of stuff that people are arguing against. Like one of the things is about Ranger and the fact that their thing is still concentration. But I had an argument about that, like with their concentration.
A lot of other spells have lost concentration. We'll get to it. We'll get to it.
So yeah, One D&D. We haven't read everything, but this is our initial thoughts.
Okay.
So just also to reiterate, we are going from 5th edition into not necessarily a new edition.
Yeah.
This is a revamp of 5th edition, which is going to be how D&D is going forward. This is their plan to keep it as this one
D&D.
Yeah, One D&D, this one central system now.
Yeah, everything will be built on top of this, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. So D&D 5e came out in 2014.
And it's been immensely popular amongst a lot of people.
Yeah, and there have been a little bit of like revamps here and there on various of the previous species that maybe didn't work as well as initially hoped, and so weren't getting a lot of play. A lot of this is informed by, I'm assuming, statistics on D&D Beyond, which is like the go-to site now if you are looking to play D&D digitally. It is affiliated with Wizards of the Coast, who publish Dungeons and Dragons.
I mean, Wizards of the Coast have bought D&D Beyond.
Yeah, like
it is Wizards of the Coast.
So this is also where we're getting all of this new information is from D&D Beyond. And yes, so one of the main concerns, I think, around One D&D has just been the rollout of information because, we're all nerds. Nerds classically don't like change to the things that they love.
I mean, though 4th edition was the first time that I actually started DMing and actually playing it, I did know about 3rd edition and 3.5, which was the first time they did something similar to this.
Yeah.
3.5 was a little bit of a revamp, and you could still use your old stuff, but this is the new base rules. So coming from these earlier editions, I'm really used to change. I've gone through 3rd edition, 4th edition. I was honestly hesitant to go into 5th edition because it was a lot more theater of the mind, and I liked having all the numbers and rules and structure. I was like, this is information I can use. I wasn't as good as improv at that time. There's a lot, as you said, there's a lot of diversity to change, but I think a lot of changes can be good.
Yeah. I mean, I'm also coming from the perspective in which I have literally just behind me in a bookshelf 24 Dungeons and Dragons 5e books.
Which, if people are on our Instagram, probably seen the post of where I showed it.
I like the books.
But all that's still valid.
Yeah, well, it is now, because this was one of the things that...
It was always going to be.
Hang on.
They always said that the old stuff was going to work, but there was something they mentioned recently that people didn't like.
Which has since been rolled back. So, again, if you are playing digitally on D&D Beyond, any characters that were built with the 5e system are now considered quote-unquote legacy. So they can still, theoretically, work fine. Yeah, shaking hand motion.
It can still work if you're using it with the old legacy stuff.
Yeah,
other legacy
you would need,
stuff.
for example, if you were playing previously, as we were, for example, Kurusk, my character from one of your campaigns.
He was a half-orc.
A half-orc. Half-orc no longer exists in D&D, in 1D&D.
Currently.
As of right now, it's not a thing. So
Monster Manual might add something, we don't know yet.
We'll see. Again, it's so early days with this. But on paper, right now, Kurusk, as I created him previously, cannot exist within 1D&D. Now, I can
purely
still...
legacy.
Yeah, I can still technically play as him on D&D Beyond, but I can't use any of the new classes that 1D&D is coming out with. It would have to still be a legacy class from 5e.
It'll let you. It will let you use newer stuff. Using the two together isn't balanced because it's not meant to be used together.
Yeah.
So there is no limitation to what you can do. It's just you might not have the best experience, or it might not work how you think it should work. So I think a lot of the changes that they have made has been for a little bit of balancing, but also just to make things a lot easier and streamlined to understand.
But one of the concerns about this was D&D Beyond being a website and being a massive collation of every spell, species, magical item, class available for 5th edition in perpetuity, as it's, internet's forever, put out a statement a few weeks ago that's saying, in One D&D, you will not be able to use legacy spells or magical items.
Yeah, they were straight up just...
They weren't going to be available anymore. Players would have to homebrew, meaning you create it yourself, using the inbuilt homebrew functions. And players were not happy about this. Now, as I mentioned, this change has been rolled back as of August 26th. This is the official statement from D&D Beyond. Players who only have access to the 2014 Player's Handbook will maintain their character options, spells, magical items in their character sheets. Players with access to the 2024 and 2014 Digital Player's Handbooks can select from both sources when creating new characters. Players will not need to rely on homebrew to use their 2014 player options, including spells and magical items as recommended in previous changelogs.
Yeah, so I still don't know how it works with the class themselves. Like, so when I've been creating characters today, so far, I put the character in, I pick the class, and the spell list is just a spell list. I haven't seen an option for choosing legacy or not.
None.
Now, I didn't go into the spell list in detail, but I didn't see anything.
Yeah.
Initially. And this has only been an issue for digital, because technically, no matter what, once you had the book,
a physical book will eventually come out. And this is another thing, if you are playing physically, which is another reason why there is a little bit of pushback against it. Again, there is nothing stopping anybody who is currently playing 5e from continuing playing 5e. In the same way that people all the time go back to 3.5 and 4e just because that's what they're most comfortable with. But people have bought a lot of peripherals for their characters. For example, again, on the shelf behind me is a collection of spell cards specifically for the 5th edition cleric class.
Yeah.
If we wanted to play a physical version of One D&D, we would need to get the One D&D version of that spell listing.
Which is something that I was a little bit confused about today when I was looking through the marketplace. Because the marketplace actually has those spell cards for sale, but it doesn't say what edition.
Oh, that's annoying.
It doesn't say if it's 1D&D compatible or if it's Legacy. It has the same packaging.
Oh, does it?
It looks the exact same.
Oh, God. Okay. I was going to say we're going to have to rely on the artwork.
No, it's the exact same price. It's the same packaging, which is why I was confused. I don't know what this is for. But apparently, you can't buy any Legacy stuff on D&D Beyond anymore.
You have to rely on your local game store then.
If you want it digital, you have to already own it, or you just have to buy the new stuff.
Which, yeah, that's my other beef with D&D Beyond is, as I said, I have 24 D&D 5e books on the shelf behind me. I don't have all of them on D&D Beyond because I technically have to buy the digital version. So I'm buying the book twice.
Yeah.
It's annoying.
Which is feedback that they took from people, and now on D&D Beyond you buy the physical and digital together.
Yeah. So
you still have to buy both separately, but when you're buying them together on D&D Beyond, it's discounted. So at least it's not as bad. It's like
we'll see what the shipping cost is like.
It's not that bad actually.
Okay.
I think you get the digital versions for a tenner, at least in the full bundle. So the full bundle was the physical for 1D&D, the physical handbook, monster manual, and DM's guide, and all of those in digital as well for an extra tenner.
A tenner each or total?
€10 just total. I think I could be wrong. It might be tenner each.
Watch this space.
I have already pre-ordered the digital versions
for
myself, which is, like I said, this is why I can see it early. I did it for this episode. So again, we have a Patreon if you want to help us out with that.
Yeah, we were just looking at it today, and you got access to it yesterday, was it?
It was yesterday or the day before, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm so set in my ways when it comes to these things. It annoys me, partially because, by which I mean, let me rephrase. Hang on. It annoys me, one, because they're making changes that I don't necessarily agree with. It annoys me, two, I'm annoyed at myself because I can't just go with the flow. But there are some interesting changes. So, for example, there are 4 species that you get for free just by signing up for D&D Beyond, which are human, dwarf, is it gnome or halfling? Halfling and elf.
Yeah.
And then there are 5 others that you get with the player handbook.
6. There's 10 options total.
Yes, sorry. Because originally we only had 9.
We originally got 9. Now we get 10 in the base book. Which, I'm just going to say, the base book is amazing. The art that's in it so far that people have seen has been top notch. The actual layout is so simple. And for the first time in all the years of D&D, they actually teach you how to play the game before you make your character. They tell you...
A novel concept.
I know. They tell you what D&D is and how to play it now before you make your character. Before, it was all about making the character, then it would give you the rules. But how do you make a character when you don't know what the character is going to do? So that's one change that I'm actually quite happy with. And
yeah, I have D&D Beyond open on my phone right now. I don't own the new player handbook, so I can only create the dwarf, elf, halfling, and human using the new 2024 rules. Everything else is considered either legacy or expanded rules.
Yeah, and I'm overall actually happy with a lot of the changes. I do like a lot of the things I've seen for One D&D. I think it's fantastic for new players. I think it's going to be so much easier and streamlined. I honestly think that it's more open to interpretation. There's less set in stone rules for different things and a more general, broad spectrum that allows you to make it what you want it to be.
Oh, interesting. Sorry, I'm just noticing something.
We're having an episode right now.
I'm sorry. I've just noticed that I only have access to 4 of the classes as well under the new rules.
Out of curiosity, what are the new classes?
The ones that I have.
Or sorry, not new classes.
The free ones.
Classes.
It's the free one. Cleric, fighter, rogue, and wizard.
That kind of covers the
majority.
Because
most common.
Yeah, like you got a magic user, you got your fighter, and the fighter can do basically everything the ranger can do anyways. Though they are a little bit different now with One D&D when things I like. It is nice that they give you this stuff for free, so anyone now can go onto D&D Beyond, create an account, and play.
Not spawn.
Not sponsored. Would greatly appreciate it though. Another of the changes that I really like is the updates they made to martial classes, and how martial classes now have the battle mastery.
Ooh, yes.
So I had a problem with martial classes, which was, and a martial class is basically like your warrior, your monk,
barbarian,
anything that used a weapon of some sort to attack with. I always had a problem that it would be basically their really their only action was they were waiting for it to come around to their turn, and they make an attack with their weapon, and they end their turn. That's it. I attack my weapon, it hits, I deal damage, next.
I hit it again. I hit it a third time.
I hit it again. I hit it again.
Yes, guess what? I hit it again, but harder.
This time, even harder. You know, yeah, you could role play it out, but overall, it was kind of boring, in my opinion, and a little basic. When you have something like a rogue, they have a lot of different little things they can do. They can sneak around, they can get things triggered, traps, etc. You have wizards, they can put out like area of effects, they can change the outcome of the battlefield. But yeah, a martial class was boring. It just attacked. Maybe it could grapple. Now with battle mastery, there's a lot more that can be done. So There's a lot more maneuvers, uh, things they can do in the heat of the moment. They can make changes to adapt to the outcome of things. And it means that they have a lot more strategy involved, a lot more options every turn coming around. Well, actually, I'm going to do this because that would give you a chance to do something. So very happy with the changes there.
Yeah, because even when we were playing 5e, you started off as a rogue and you very quickly got bored. So you became.
And I subclassed into wizard.
Yeah, after you had already picked the Arcane Trickster subclass.
Yeah. It just felt cool. I did a lot of damage. Rogue can do more, but I eventually went to magic because I wanted to be able to do more.
Yeah. There's more interesting options.
What change in 1D&D is it that right now is making you most hesitant about the changes?
Okay. Well, I mean, for one,
because I am actually very happy with all the changes.
I mean, for one, I think it's just because I spent so much time learning a lot of the ins and outs of 5th edition, and now I have to do it all over again.
It's still the same system. A lot
on the face of it,
a lot of the rules are the same. You're not learning the ins and outs as such, but it is true that when you know classes off by heart,
yeah,
you know exactly what a class does. You know exactly what species do.
Yeah, it's also, we mentioned before, I think, that Wizards of the Coast's least favorite class, the Ranger, has a...
Yes, we said we get to this.
Yeah, a core spell that is, like, what their class kind of hinges on. Like, often they just get it by default. It's called Hunter's Mark.
So
Hunter's Mark is the worst spell ever.
I do disagree a little bit because I feel like nowadays with 1D&D it doesn't hinge on it as much, at least in my opinion. But
yeah, the reason why Hunter's Mark was annoying is because it was a concentration spell, meaning the player could not use another spell without losing Hunter's Mark. What Hunter's Mark did was it would grant you an extra hit dice when you attacked whichever enemy had the Hunter's Mark.
To be fair, Rangers have very little spell slots. They're not really doing a lot of magic anyways.
Depends on the Ranger.
It depends, but generally the only magic they have is slight support.
But here's the other thing. Because it's a concentration spell, the player had to concentrate on remembering to move it when the enemy that they had placed it on died, because you could move it as a bonus action. So say, for example, you cast Hunter's Mark on enemy A and you deal enough damage that it dies. You then have to use your bonus action to move it to enemy B. And if you forget, you lose Hunter's Mark entirely. You have to cast it again using up another of your limited spell slots. Right?
That seems fairly normal to me.
Right. So
you know your class, you know your stuff.
I know, it's just, you're caught in the heat in the battle. It's an easy thing to forget.
There's plenty of things you can forget for everything else as well. I don't think that's one.
Right. But there are a bunch of other spells that in 5th edition are considered concentration spells that in 1D&D no longer have that concentration feature.
Yeah.
Hunter's Mark still does.
And I think it should.
Yeah, we've talked about this before.
Yeah. The spells that they removed from concentration from, I think mostly, yeah, that makes sense. It also is a case of it depends on how close to the combat a wizard is versus how close to the combat a ranger is. And my argument or my whole thing about it is, and anyone can disagree with me, I'd love to hear in the comments what you think yourselves. But if you're in a battle, there's a lot happening. There's a lot of things moving. There's people going all over the place. And if you're using Hunter's Mark, which is you focusing on a single character and keeping track of that character amongst everything that's happening the whole time, I mean, you can't say you're not concentrating on that.
No, that's fair. And that's not really the issue. It's more so that one of the things about having a spell with concentration is that you can lose concentration through battle. So if you take damage, you have to roll a concentration check, which is essentially a constitution check. And you have to hit a number that is, I believe, above your spell casting modifier plus whatever level the spell is.
I think concentrations, I could be wrong. I need to look into it more. Like I said, all this stuff, we're going to get stuff wrong. Don't take it by this gospel. But I'm pretty sure that your concentration now works off of what your dominant skill is.
As opposed to previously it was... Oh, okay.
So, like, previously it was con, but now, like, your concentration is working off your... If you're a ranger, dexterity, whatever.
Interesting. All right, that's another change I was unaware of.
Now, I, again, might be wrong on that.
So, but again, so say for example, as you mentioned, wizard. I have a spell list here.
And as you're looking at that,
yeah,
ranger, limited spells. I don't think they're completely reliant on Hunter's Mark. It is just a good part of their build, but I don't think they're completely reliant.
Okay, so one such spell is Wall of Ice. Now, this one isn't a fantastic example because both the legacy and current versions require concentration. But say you are a wizard casting Wall of Ice, and you are using it to defend a group of friendly NPCs from the bad guys, and you get hit, and you fail your concentration check. The wall of frost goes down, and now the enemies are, they have a way to get to the friendly NPCs. You now have to come up with a new plan, and that spell slot is poof. You need to do something else,
which is part of combat,
right? If that spell does not have concentration, you get hit. The wall stays up.
Okay, so what's the argument?
My argument in being a DM is you are essentially taking away a little bit of the flavor of combat by having a very powerful spell not, have this extra caveat to it.
Okay, so Wall of Ice doesn't have concentration anymore?
It does, but I'm using it as an example.
Okay.
I need to find one of the ones that does not
the only
have it.
things they've removed concentration from basically shouldn't have had concentration.
Oh, here's one.
Okay.
True Strike used to have concentration, no longer does.
Can't quite remember what True Strike does.
True Strike is a divination cantrip. Guided by a flash of magical insight, you make one attack with the weapon used in the spell's casting. The attack using your spell casting modifier for the attack, and damage rolls instead of using dexterity or strength. If the attack deals damage, it can be radiant damage or normal weapon type, your choice.
I mean, to be honest, I actually didn't follow that.
Basically, if you're a wizard, you can make an attack with a dagger, but use your spell casting modifier, your intelligence, rather than your dexterity, which is assumably lower.
Okay.
And that is a spell that was previously concentration.
That doesn't make any sense to be concentration.
I think it does.
Why?
Because you're channeling your magical power into the weapon.
It's happening in an instant.
Well,
you also have to remember you're going to be up close next to someone.
Well, this is the thing. So the duration has changed as well. The new duration is instantaneous. So you slash and it happens.
Yeah. That's how it should work, in my opinion.
Yeah. The previous duration was up to 1 round.
Okay, which is 60 seconds.
Theoretically, yeah. But it means that if you got an attack of opportunity, you could use it.
It still doesn't make sense for concentration on me.
Fair.
It seems 60 seconds, it seems very instant versus...
Is Toll of the Dead gone? Sorry.
versus having a literal wall of fire that you're channeling power into and trying to maintain the whole time, which still has concentration because it should. I mean, everyone can have a different opinion on it. I am under the opinion that I think the changes with concentration are good. I think they removed it from the places that it wasn't needed.
So I have found an example where in the legacy version, the spell did not have concentration, and now it does.
Okay. I'd say it probably has a reason to, but...
So it's sleep.
Okay. Interesting.
Previously, it just had a duration of 1 minute. If you're aware, it's you put enemies to sleep if they fail a saving throw. Now it's concentration up to 1 minute.
Huh. That's interesting. Okay.
I assume this means that if you lose concentration, they just wake up.
Yeah. Other changes includes how much hit points or anything like that. Like, is it more powerful as a spell? Because if it's more powerful as a spell, then that makes sense where you can just put something to sleep. Because if they're asleep, they're not really going to hit you anyways.
It's a choice within a 5-foot radius sphere.
Just a choice.
Center on a point within a range must succeed a wisdom saving throw or have the incapacitated condition until the next turn, at which point it must repeat the save.
Wow, that is very powerful now.
So they've just changed the spell 100%.
I think that's better.
It's going to be abused more, but that's probably why it has that concentration. Yeah.
Again, I think the changes are good. I think a lot of people are just averse to change.
Yeah.
And aren't some people, I know a lot of people are thinking about it, but I think some people are just going, it's different, I don't like it, rather than thinking about why it's changed.
No, it is worth noting that in the view that I have, I only have a very small window of what spells are actually available, because even though I have the classes that I mentioned earlier, fighter, rogue, cleric, and wizard, I only have access to one of the subclasses. So I can only pick a life domain cleric. I can only pick a thief rogue. Yeah. And that's going to limit, again, the spells and things that I can see that are newly available.
Yeah, that's true. One thing, I like that all the classes that they've put into the player's handbook for One D&D, I like that they all have 4 subclasses now. All of them have 4 well-rounded subclasses. And I think more versatile.
It'll be interesting to see how that changes going forward, because they're not going to stop here. That's like they've said as much. They're going to keep going and build off of this.
Yeah.
And wizard, the class that I was looking at just then to see how many spells I could access, I actually can't pick a wizard subclass at all right now. I don't know if that's because it's in the full edition of the handbook. I imagine that's probably the case.
I mean, I have the full edition, so I can just look at it.
No, fair.
Guessing.
But wizard was one of the classes that a lot of people got overwhelmed by because there were so many choices, so many schools of magic to choose from, to the point where it's just kind of like...
Oh, you mean originally?
Yeah, because I think every class...
Yeah, wizards had too much going on.
Wizard and cleric had the most domains.
And you have to read through every single one of those being like, what does this one do? What does this one do?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I think...
Which I still don't know.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I think when people really got into Baldur's Gate 3 and started using that as a jumping off point into D&D proper, you look at all of the different subclasses that are available through Legacy and you're like, can I just have the 3 options I did before and just work from there?
So I'm just having a quick look here at Wizard.
The other thing on that, though, on the subclasses, is not all classes got additional content unilaterally. So, for example, whenever a new book came out, you might get a new fighter subclass or a new wizard school or something like that. Or popular ones were druid circles. That came up in a lot of books because druid was kind of considered underpowered and needed a bit of a boost.
Mm-hmm. And druid's apparently very powerful.
Yeah. Fighter got next to nothing.
Well, Battle Mastery give fighter a lot, and it does have the 4 class options now as well.
Well, now, yes, but prior to One D&D.
Oh, prior, sorry.
Yeah, I just mean you might get a new subclass in the Saltmarsh Coast book, but you might not get another for another 6 books, as opposed to what I am assuming they're going to try and do, because they're starting off with like an even playing field as far as we know. With these subclasses, they
Yeah.
might do their best to add new ones across the board, as a going like, oh, here's a wizard, here's a druid.
Yeah, it was just maybe 1 or 2 every couple of books or something
Yeah.
in different classes, and some did get more than others. So from Wizard, they do have 4.
Okay.
The core rules has the Abjurer, the Diviner, the Evoker, and the Illusionist.
Diviner, I assume.
Oh, Diviner?
Yeah. Okay, so 4 makes sense, because I just double checked in the original Wizards class in the Player's Handbook 2014 edition had 8.
8 from the start.
Yeah. Now there is definitely an overlap. So you said it was Abjurer. What was it? What were the other ones?
Abjurer, Diviner, Evoker, Illusionist.
I'm curious. Okay, so that covers School of Abjuration, School of Divination, School of Evocation, and School of Illusion.
Yeah, it covers the 4 schools of
The ones that people would go for, basically.
Yeah, they don't have necromancy.
Conjuration, enchantment, or transmutation are the ones that they're missing.
Yeah, and they're probably just put in through other subclasses like the other ones.
Like again, we're working off of fresh information. We'd need to like get into the nitty gritty on this.
And some of the later editions that were added in 5th edition do still work.
Yeah.
With 1D&D being that, the expanded rules for blade singing, Order of Scribes, and War Magic.
I like Order of Scribes. That's a really good wizard class.
Yeah, and I really like blade singing, but I think that's only for elves. But
Meh.
DM's discretion.
What new cleric domains are there? Because I could only see life.
For the cleric,
Yeah, because we're doing live comparison.
we're doing a live comparison, but we won't go into this too much because honestly,
I'm curious.
there's so much to go over, and it's well worth reading a lot of it as well yourselves.
Your divine domain, you should be able to choose at first level.
And your divine,
Divine?
your divine order.
You're so divine.
I'll have fish and chips, please. Your divine order, it seems to be only 2.
Oh, okay. What 2?
That's interesting. That means there's a lot less.
I'm
just going to increase the level and see if there's anything beyond that.
D&D Beyond.
Okay, so you have your divine order, but there's also then later on at 3rd level a cleric subclass.
Okay, so you choose it much later because you used to choose that at level 1.
Yeah, level 1 divine order is protector or thaumaturge.
So it sounds a little bit like the paladin oaths.
Kind of. We'll have to read into that.
We're going to have another episode about the One D&D for sure.
And then our subclasses, which I believe there should be 4, which there is.
Okay.
So far, yeah, it seems everything definitely has 4 subclasses at the start. And for this, we have life domain, light domain, trickery domain, and war domain.
Interesting that they kept trickery.
Yes.
Considered one of the worst domains.
Well, it's completely changed now.
That's true. So that means we're missing. So it was life, light, trickery, and war.
Life, light, trickery, and war. Yeah.
Okay, so we're missing death, knowledge, nature, and tempest. This is another class that originally in 2014 had 8 options.
Yeah.
Because it was meant to align with whichever god they chose.
But we do still have the expanded rules, which is the Arcana domain from Swords Coast.
Yep.
There's the Forge domain from Xanathar's Guide, the Grave domain from Xanathar's Guide, the Order domain from Tasha's Cauldron, and the other 2 are also from Tasha's Cauldron, Peace domain and Twilight domain.
At a certain point, you gotta wonder what any of these mean.
Yeah.
Like, do you want to be a healing wizard? Pick Arcana.
There's a lot to look at.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do a deep dive on this. Just like throw stuff at the wall, see what sticks.
So my overall opinion on changes of 1D&D, personally, positive. Hannah to be confirmed, I think.
I think what I will have to do is I don't have access to this stuff yet. Because even though we are sharing a lot of content on D&D Beyond, that's something that you can't share with me right now. You won't be able to share it with me until it's available, like, completely.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you go into the campaign that you're part of, you can't.
I don't think so.
Well, have you looked?
Let's find out later.
Well, no, it might be important for people to know if
let's
they can. If you already have this, if early, are you able to share it with your players? So, and just a very quick plug.
Oh yeah.
So the campaign Nordenfeld that I'm working on, I mentioned that I'm writing a book for it. Basically, like a player guide, just to give an idea of stuff. That will be available for anyone on the Patreon, as well as behind the scenes, bloopers, deleted stuff like that, depending on the tier you pick, access to our Discord, and also for sometime in the future, still working out the details, there will be a game hosted by myself for the campaign setting for Patreon members of a certain tier. It will be a limited amount of people that can pick the tier, and we will see if we are going to stream that or not. But if you want access to the resources that we have available, you can join our campaign on D&D Beyond, where I have most stuff, so you'll be able to use it as well.
We're also going to be sharing our affiliate link for Dakota Dice, because if you're like us and you love D&D, you're likely a dice goblin as well.
Yep, and they've been really good to help us out with a code for everyone to use. So if you want to get 10% off any order of Dakota Irish Dice, that doesn't already have a promotion on it, I believe. There is terms and conditions. Just use Irish Nerdcast, all one word, caps, and you will get 10% off your orders. So that will let them know that we sent you there, and we get a little bit of commission, and you get a savings. So it helps us out, and you also help yourself out by getting more dice.
Get the shiny math rocks.
So the clickety clangs.
By the way, I checked. I do have access when it comes to your campaign.
Okay.
So definitely going to be testing things out.
Good to know. So if you share it with people, they have access, even though it's early.
Okay. So I think with all that being said, you are positive, I am to be determined, and we can revisit this in a few weeks when we know more.
Yeah. There is so many more changes than what we've mentioned. Classes, subclasses, species, and lineage are stuff that people will be most interested about with the changes. And overall, I think they're going to be fairly positive. And the fact that you can use it with your old stuff, I don't think it's something that people should be afraid of, because it's not going to take away what you're doing already. It gives you more options. And guess what? Drinking a potion is now a bonus action.
Finally.
Actually, and this is the last little bit of thing I'm going to point out before we finish up.
Uh-huh.
About potions, they've expanded upon the kits. You know, when you had like a brewer's kit and
and the cartographer's kit, and none of it mattered.
They've actually put stuff in it, what they can do. And for example, the brewer's kit can now actually, it gives you a rule for making a potion. So you can do a potion for this much material for this amount of time. And they also say, like, if you want to, was that a brewer's kit or a herbalist kit? It was one or the other.
One of the two.
One of the two. And also you can use it to analyze what certain plants are.
All right, D&D Beyond. All right. I'll give you that one.
So it is really cool because a lot of people just did not know what.
They just didn't. Anyway.
It was there. It said you had a kit. No one really knew what it did. And now it has some stuff to tell you, like, here, you could do this sort of stuff with it.
Kind of the same way that certain backgrounds would give you a chessboard and be like, all right, I have this now.
Yeah, pretty much. But now I think they're going to be actually releasing stuff that you can play those games in-game. So that's going to be fun.
All right. Play some Dragon Ante.
And I really like the way they did the class. And class now determines your ability score increase and stuff like that.
Yeah. So we'll play around with it. We'll let you know our thoughts as we go. And again, we will definitely have a follow-up episode to this in future.
Yep. And I think that's where we're going to wrap this up.
Yeah. One thing we do want to make you aware of, in addition to our affiliate links and our Patreon and all the rest of it, is that we have a Twitch schedule now.
Yes. We are going to be more regularly streaming on Twitch on Mondays from 8. Yes. On Mondays from 8 p.m. UTC +1. We will have Hannah playing some cozy games.
Yep. Casual Mondays.
Casual Mondays. On Tuesday, I will be playing RimWorld from 3 p.m. So after you finish listening to one of our episodes, you can come and watch us stream.
Mm-hmm.
And then on Thursday, we'll be doing Zenless Zone Zero from 8 p.m.
Yeah. Our schedule is going to be posted on the Twitch channel as well. So don't forget to follow us everywhere at Irish Nerdcast. And with that, I'm Hannah.
And I'm JoJo.
And we'll see you in the next one.
Slán go fóill.